Hey everybody, thanks for joining me for another episode of Check This Out. On this installment of Can a Truck Driver Cook? I would like to head back over to Japan. Today's dish is one that many people may not immediately think of when they think of Japanese food. It's usually something like sushi or ramen or maybe even udon noodles. But today's dish is probably more exclusively Japanese than any of the ones I just mentioned. It's the most expensive meat in the world. Japanese Wagyu. Specifically, in this case, Japanese Miyazaki A5 Wagyu. I had the opportunity once to try A5 at one of Gordon Ramsay's Atlantic City restaurants, Gordon Ramsay Steak. When our server brought around the evening's meat offerings, he had two types of Wagyu on the cart, Australian MBS or Marbling Score 7-8, and Japanese Wagyu A5. At the time, I really didn't know the difference between one Wagyu and another. The only thing I did know was that the server told me the A5 was $35 an ounce. Yeah, and there was a 4-ounce minimum. $140 for a 4-ounce steak. Ouch! The Australian was much cheaper, so I figured, what the heck, if I can get real Wagyu for less than half the price, then why spend all that money on the Japanese stuff? Later, I found out why. After returning home, I decided to do some research into this mysterious A5 to find out exactly what the difference was. And as I found out, the difference was huge. The more I researched, the more confusing things became. And the more I wanted to try this meat of the gods. But what to get? Yes, there is more than one type of Wagyu A5. Did I want Kobe beef? Or Sous? Or maybe Miyazaki? It was all becoming way too confusing. Here's a chart that shows the fat content and the marbling of the different grades. A good piece of prime steak at a high-end steakhouse in the US may have 12% IMF or intermuscular fat, whereas a Japanese A5 can have as much as 56% intermuscular fat. I can hear you saying now that surely that much beef fat would have to be terrible for you. Au contraire, ladies and gentlemen, Wagyu fat has less saturated fat than any other beef because it contains the delta-9 desaturase, which basically takes stearic acid, a saturated fatty acid, and changes it to oleic acid, an unsaturated fatty acid. Or that is to say, polyunsaturated fat, which is the good fat. Believe it or not, Japanese A5 Wagyu actually has the lowest cholesterol levels of all meats, and that's, believe it or not, including fish or chicken. Yes, somehow in the breeding process, the Japanese have found a way to turn beef fat into something good for you. Leave it to the Japanese. All of that said, I decided to get the Miyazaki Wagyu A5 and the Australian Wagyu MBS 8-9 from Grand Western Steaks, so I could do a side-by-side comparison between the two. By the way, Grand Western, not a sponsor, but I would welcome them as one. I chose them for two reasons. Guga from the Sous Vide Everything channel has used them for years. And the steaks I've seen him cook on his channel that he got from them looked like the finest I'd ever seen. Second, they have some great deals. Along with my A5, they included 6 Maine lobster tails. It helped take a little bit of the sting out of the price of the Wagyu. I will put links to both the Sous Vide Everything channel and Grand Western Steaks in the description down below. The next big question was how to cook these guys. There is no margin for error when you're cooking a steak that costs $88 for 4 ounces. But as the t-shirt says, there is no question. It's sous vide all the way. If you have never cooked sous vide, let me tell you, it's a life changer. Ever since I found out about it, I have never had a steak come out anything but absolutely perfect. It's nearly impossible to make a mistake with sous vide. When it's done cooking, just pop it out, sear it on both sides, get a nice crust, and that's it. A beautiful medium rare steak, or whatever temperature you happen to like your steak. except for well done, which we do not speak of on this channel. Just like Voldemort in the Harry Potter series, it's the steak temperature that shall not be named. I believe that anyone who cooks a Japanese A5 to that temperature that shall not be named stands a good risk of being called before the International Criminal Court in The Hague for crimes against humanity. I'm just saying, cook it to that temperature at your own risk, okay? But seriously, with the cost of meat, any meat these days, and the cost of a sous vide cooker on Amazon being, in some cases, less than the cost of a steak or two, it's almost silly not to get the insurance sous vide provides. And besides, sous vide is good for way more than just meat. Now that the stage is set, let's get over to the kitchen and cook some steak. Okay, here we go. Japanese Wagyu A5. And I don't mind telling you, I'm nervous about this one. There's basically 4 regions in Japan that sell Wagyu beef. Most everybody's heard of Kobe, but this is the Miyazaki. They're all just as good. Slight bit of difference in flavor because of, diet or whatever, but this is A5. And this is over $20 an ounce. This 4-ounce piece of meat here was $88. And your humble host is certifiably insane for paying that for a piece of meat. But as you can see, I think you would say it's pretty nicely marbled. That's an understatement. Listen, I knew I was never going to be happy until I tried this stuff. I had an opportunity in Atlantic City at Gordon Ramsay Steak. They had the Australian marbling score 6.7. This is an 8.9, and they had the A5. Well, they both said Wagyu on them, and this one was a lot cheaper. So I went with it. Then doing some more research into the A5, that this is nothing like this. And here is the certificate of authenticity. Tells the carcass number, the harvest weight, the grading, the name of the cow. It's all on there. It's 100% traceable and certified. So since I'm nervous about this, there's only one way to cook this, and that way is obviously sous vide. I've got it set at 130 degrees. That should be on the low end of medium rare. I usually go somewhere between 128 and 135, depending on how thick the cut is. This is not a real thick cut, so we're set at 130 right now. Now we're going to keep the seasoning very simple indeed. Salt, pepper, and nothing else. I'm going to use some flake salt here. I want this to set up nice and high on the top. And we're going to put it on generous. Some pepper. And we'll get the other side now. And let's roll this one around on our board. Season the sides of it. And we'll do the same with our Australian. There we go, that's it for the seasoning. Now let's get them into the vacuum bag. Okay, when you have this much invested in meat, I think like 20 cents for a bag is not a big deal, so we'll go ahead and use 2 here. Let's get over to the vacuum sealer. Okay, here we go, steak number 1. Looks like the Australian 8.9 is ready to go. Now let's do the next one. There we go, looks pretty good. Now let's get over to the sous vide and get them in and start this whole process going. Okay, we're at 130 degrees. Let's go ahead and put these bad boys in. We'll set our timer for probably 30 to 45 minutes. I think I'll go 45. And we're off and running. Once they're done, we'll bring them out and sear them off because they look kind of anemic when they come out of a sous vide. But they are the perfect temperature from stem to stern. And then we just put a nice sear on it and they look fantastic. Okay, our steaks just came out of the sous vide. I got them patted dry. And we're going to put them in a rocket hot carbon steel pan. Probably only going to need about 1 minute on each side. Start off with the Australian Wagyu. And there's the $88 piece of meat. Let's go ahead and get the sides of this one a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty darn good. Let's go ahead and plate up now. Okay, there we have our beautiful little meal. Our Wagyu A5 and our Australian MBS 8.9. Now it's time to do a side-by-side comparison of them. First of all, let's take a look inside. I don't think this one is going to need much cutting. No, not really. You can just see the layers of that Wagyu fat running through there. And how about the Australian? Well, you can tell already that it's not as tender, but this steak knife isn't as sharp as it should be. There we go. Beautiful. So here we go, the first taste of Japanese Miyazaki. Well, it's tender enough. Here goes nothing. I hope it's worth it. Wow. I don't know how to describe that. It doesn't even really taste like beef, but it doesn't taste like anything else either. It's absolutely delicious, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's fantastic. But I think that's the problem that some people have with it. It's really rich because of all the fat, and it's unlike anything I ever tasted. I'm not saying I don't like it, but it is definitely different. Now let's try the Marbling Score 8.9. Very tender, probably one of the best cuts of regular beef I've ever had. But this tastes like beef. This tastes like A5, okay? Nothing wrong with either one of these. I don't know what I was expecting out of this. I've done a lot of research into it, but I need another piece. Okay. That is gorgeous. That is absolutely different, but gorgeous. So I'm going to enjoy some of this one. I'm going to share half of each one with my wife. So hey, thanks once again for joining me. I usually don't do too much with the sous vide machine because I've got Guga out there with the Sous Vide Everything channel, and hey, he's the best. He's got the budget where he can afford this kind of stuff all the time, and I can't. So if you ever want to check out more sous vide cooking, Sous Vide Everything, or Guga Foods, he's got 2 channels. So hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed this. I know it's a little bit different than what I normally do, but I had this stuff here, so I figured, hey, why not video it? Thanks once again for all the subscribers this week. They still keep coming in. Moving toward that monetization point. Can't wait, I'm about halfway there. So please keep it up for me. I appreciate every single one of you. So take care, keep cooking, and we'll see you next time on Check This Out.